Okie dokie. So one of the biggest things that we find people have problem with is the idea of taking material from square back to round or square into round. Whenever you're drawing down a taper, you'll be doing it in the square. It's the most efficient manner in which to move that material. But then when you want to return it back to square, how do you do it? Basically, you're going to have a square point and something like this. And you're going to come in down the corner here and enlarge this facet so that your square becomes a good geometrically correct octagon. Octagon. So if you do not get it geometrically right and you leave this kind of half done, you're going to wind up with something that looks like a chiclet. It's going to be squarish with rounded soft corners. So if you bring this all the way to octagonal and then you lay another facet to create 16s, and on larger material you go to 32nds, so on and so forth, until it has returned as close to round in straight linear lines as you can before actually going around and hammer finishing the rings running down the bar. So what I'll be doing is then laying in these diamonds like that. This one of course will come down to here, this one down to here. Okay? So let me start with the square point. When you're making your square point for this, you want to stop with your final dimension on the tip a little larger than you finally want it, so probably twice the dimension. I'm going to try and get this down to about a 16th on the tip, so I'm going to stop somewhere around an 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. Okay, so that's my roughing in done. I'm going to straighten the bar. Center my point and clean up. A little bit of light hammer finishing. Okay, so you'll see the tip of my bar there. I've left a little chunky at a little tiny bit over an 1/8 of an inch. So that'll work very nicely. My length on that is coming up close to 2. I've got my shoulders in from my square point, which I'm pretty happy with. So that'll give me a good reference for that. The next section will be working in those corners. So when you're coming in to work the octagonal corners, understand that the point, this point here on the octagonal facet, is at the same plane or same angle as this square point. So if you're setting up your bar on your anvil like this, and that is 22 degrees, and you're holding your material by setting that 22 that is here at 11 degrees. When you turn it onto the diamond, so onto the corner of the material, you're still holding it at the 11 degrees to create a 22 degrees point. Numbers aside, what that means is, because this surface is wider than the dimension of corner to corner, so if you look at this here, right, we've got 5/8 bar stock this way, but when you go corner to corner, you're over 3/4, you're closer to 7/8, okay? So it means that what's going to happen, if you adjust to bring that point down, you're actually going to change your angle. So do not move as you turn that 45 degrees onto the corner, okay? And your hammer blow still comes down at the same 22 degrees. So, all being said, don't change. When you're working in the corners, another thing to do is, this is your square being held on the diamond, so square, and you're hammering through like this. You want to do these two opposite first. So work this one a little, then work this one a little, back and forth until you're about 80% there. Then turn it to the other side and work those two. And that way you'll have something that is in this manner. And then you'll work those two facets in. And that way you get your octagonal. And again, work a little from one side, turn it 180, work a little from the other. And that way keeping the energy and the movement even and consistent. Be really obsessive about this. Start counting. What's going on in my head the whole time anyway. So I'm going to start, feel the angle that I was at. It's about there. I'm going to turn it up onto the corner. And you notice how the tip comes up. I'm going to hammer right here, right at that crest. Creep down a little. Turn. Turn. That's good. It's a good start. Turn to the other two. Start at the corner. I've not changed my angle. So it raises up. You'll notice how I do more work in the thicker section. Okay, work down all four a little. Okay, I'll do. So, here's a little thing that happens. You see that rotation of that line? It started to turn out to the right-hand side. This is common. Because I am right-handed, my hammer blow has a slight hook to one side. So it's likely that I'm going to get rotation. You'll also notice that my facets, if we actually measure across here, so I'm going to measure right there, and I'm give and take 1/4 of an inch. Here, about 1/4 of an inch, slightly larger than 1/4, slightly smaller than 1/4, slightly larger, about 1/4, slightly larger, back to the beginning. So I've got essentially my new laid facets are a little wider than the 1/4 of an inch. I should give or take get a 1/4 all the way around. That is good. because my next work is going to be back on the square. So I'm going to re-square the original square lines and then come back to the octagonal. So what essentially happens is you come in, you have this facet here is material thickness. I then enlarge this one to oversize. I then work the squares so that that square becomes slightly oversized. Then I come back to the octagonals, and hopefully with this pass, the octagonals will come in and even everything up. I might have to do a little bit of jiggery-pokery right at the end, but the idea is that you're always opposing the energies against each other so that they're coming in, and one pushes a little further out, the other one pushes a little further in. And with time, that frequency of overlap gets smaller and smaller as everything gets cleaner and truer. Now that I've moved most of the material, I don't need to hit it as hard. So you'll notice I won't be so far back here on the hammer. I'm going to be moving further up here, however you particularly like to do it. Just a little brush. So feel my angle again. Start on the flat, making sure that flat surface is facing me, hammering down my line. Turning 180. Again. Turn to the other. What happens here, if you're not careful, is that little bit of rotation will force you to follow it, and you'll end up with a spiral. And I personally feel when I'm rounding out that I like to try and get the octagonal formation as clean as possible before going into the round. I'm just going to work all 4 facets, making sure they're running centered through the bar. So if I have to turn my hammer just a little bit up to push that line, I will do. Okay. So you'll see what's happened at the tip here. Is that tip, it went square or octagonalized out the other way. Now you'll see that the octagonals have come back to a point there, but I have a flat here. So I've actually re-squared it in the square dimension. So sometimes it will become square. There goes the train. Sometimes it becomes square in the octagonal, and then you go back to square in the square dimension. When I bring it through on this pass, the octagonals should come back into true octagonal. You'll notice here, I've got a nice peak there, but not so much here. This one's fairly symmetrical. This one's a little heavy to the right side. This one's fairly symmetrical. It means that on this facet and this facet, my hammer blow was leaning slightly to the right. That might have been what caused my rotation at the beginning. So I'm going to be aware of that and bring the hammer up just ever so slightly to that left side. Hopefully lay those lines true. So, it's a lot. Be as concise and consistent as you can with those octagonals. A good octagonal setup makes everything else easy. And in the same vein, if you give yourself a sloppy square point to try and build a good octagonal out of, you're just fighting against the chaos. Control the chaos, control yourself, and bring the quality in right from the get-go, because each step, the quality of each step, breeds quality through to the end. Again, I don't need insane heats. making sure that this is truly up on the corner. Now run down that line. Turning 180. All the way to the tip. Notice how I'm lighter at the tip than I am up at the top. There is immensely more material up here. Turn 90 degrees to the other facet. Run down the line. There we go. Facets are back in. I'm going to run my squares one more time. Flat. Alright, let's have a look at these. They might not be perfect, but you'll see that I've got good forms coming through. Nice even distances across that shoulder there. These shoulders are coming up to about the same height on each side, and the tapers are, give or take, triangles running down to the tip. Okay? I could spend, if the exercise was just to make an octagonal point, I'd probably take one more heat at this, just to really bring those lines in at low temperature, get it really crisp so each triangle is the same. So, next section, run 16s. So in the same manner, wherever I see a high point, I'm going to run a line down. This I'm not going to do as jumping. I can't keep track of that. But do keep track of each facet. If you have to, put yourself a chalk line on the material so you know where your starting point is. It's very easy to get lost in this. If you have to, take a welder's pencil, write side 1, 2, 3, 4 on it, just to help you keep track. Again, up at the top end, I'm going to be heavier, the mass is larger. Down at the tip, I'm going to be lighter, just being very conscious. Should be good. Give it a hearty wire brush. If you have problems seeing the corners, blow on it. It'll darken them ever so slightly. There we go. Straighten at that tip. So you'll notice as you're going through this video that when it gets to the fourth corner or fifth corner, you're actually working the back side of the first corner that I worked, which means it's going to have anvil work on it. So that corner is going to become muddied. So what I was doing on those, I think I was doing 8 hammer blows per side. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that way I'm keeping in my mind, track of the number of facets that I was working on. On the next pass, with that one I was rolling out to my left. On the next one I'll roll to my right, still running those lines. Trying to get them a little bit more even and consistent with the other facets, so the original square facet and the octagonal facet. Making sure that each one of those, if they were a 1/4 inch at the widest point, are now at an 1/8 inch at the widest point. And you'll also notice that this shape here, this trapezium, I believe it is. So that bit there, now that it has another facet laid here, is starting to round out into an arch. And you want to try and keep that arch as symmetrical as possible. If you only roll to the left, it will actually cause it to lean to the right. If you roll only to the right, it will lean to the left. Okay? So make sure that you roll equally in both directions. Okay, feel my angle on my line. Alright, let's have a look at that a little closer. It is starting to appear to be in the round-ish vein. And you'll see that those arches are somewhat symmetrical in manner. A little rough, but still somewhat symmetrical. So, here we are, ready for round out. Again, if this is larger stock, you would put more facets on it. So what I'm actually going to do now is hammer finishing, essentially. I'm going to be doing a series of rings running down this material. The first ring is going to be here, right at the peak of the arches, running down to about there. So that will be my hammer face placement. Then the next one will be about here, then here, then a small one, maybe at the tip. And then at that point, I can come back and address this. What I'll do is I'll rotate, hammering small, light hammer blows, a full 360 degrees to the left and then to the right. Move down, left, right. Move down, left, right. That way I am just keeping very, very consistent with that material. I'm running from the top to the bottom. Once I have run from the top to the bottom, I'll clean up these shoulders a little bit and then run from the bottom back up to the top. By that time I should have a really good round piece of material. So, to recap, make a chunky tipped square point, laying good consistent octagonals, working opposite sides, then opposite sides. Do not try and push them all at once. If you try and push them all at once, they will distort heavily and you'll have problems trying to bring them back to true. If you do have problems with them getting out of whack, make sure that you are holding the material true to the plane that you're supposed to be working and run those lines down. Don't let the material defeat you. You are the one that's implying your will upon it. Once you've got good octagonals, and only once you've got good octagonals, can you lay in your 16s, 30 seconds, 164s, whatever it is. And then once it is appearing to be in the round visually from doing straight lines, then and only then can you start rounding up. And when I say the rounding up, that is the hammer finishing of creating the rounded finish. Little wire brush again. I'm going to start with that mark there, that ring that I drew earlier. Right there. .48. Only got 40 on that one. Move down a little bit. So I'm moving down about half a hammer face. Uh, 35, I think. I'll move down one more line. .31. I'm going to take that as another heat down there and then probably come up and address these arches. You can already see, if you look at this surface, you know, up here we got 40 some odd hammer blows in one direction, 40 in the other. You can see how that's really starting to look nice and round. And compared to that tip, which only had 16 facets on it, it's a completely different thing altogether. These arches have the intent of coming in to be good, clean arches. The shoulders are very, very similar heights. The peaks are very, very similar heights. So I'm feeling hopeful. Jessica is making strange hand gestures behind the camera at me. She can feel free to ask the question.
Okay, so I see a lot of students, when they are doing this, they seem to think that pushing the hammer blow is the thing to do here. What do you think about that?
So a brushing hammer blow, where it's kind of pushing away from you or pushing away from you, whether you're sideways or forwards, is okay in certain locations or certain reasons. This is not one of them. You are trying to hammer into the material to get the most effect out of your hammer blow. What it does look like though, as you strike, the hammer, because it's striking at an angle, is bouncing away from you. So it has this visual that it is a brushing hammer blow. It's not that. That's great for scrolling, like this, right? But for actually forging, you want that energy to go into the center of the anvil. Always think about the intent of the energy that you're putting into your hammerhead and the relationship of it going into the anvil. If you're trying to move material, you want that energy to be going into the core, right here. So that is always how the angle of your hammer blow should be going in. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Absolutely. Good wire brushing again. Work down into that tip. So I was about, see if we can find that ring, but I think I've lost it. So I'm going to start that here. .27. 5. Down slowly. Very soft down into that tip. Okay, I'm going to find those arches and I'm going to try and dress them in. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. A little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. There is a tendency to kind of lean back on these lines if you're not careful. Try not to do that. I probably did on this one. Bit of dress on my flats. See those shoulders coming in fairly nicely there. All right, last couple of heats. Start at the tip, 360 one way, 360 the other way, all the way back up again. And again, this is going to be 5, 6, 7 rings, depending on how long your taper is. If you're making, try and find an example. If you're making a punch, something like that, and you're doing rings, you could be doing 10 plus rings on a piece that long. Nothing wrong with that. If you want a good taper, time it. But again, you've got to have a good octagonal point and a good square point to make something like that. And as always, this goes for if you are on the power hammer or doing it by hand, or even a forging press. Just because such a machine can do light work, you can also make a real mess of something really quickly. Alright, wire brush, start at the tip. Lock in my hand position. Come up, keep your angle clean. My arches out a little bit. Obviously, if you're working on round bar, you don't have this problem. All right. I'll give you a good idea. It isn't perfect, but I'll let Jess get in pretty close on that one. Just see how nice and round it is, consistent. Hopefully that'll answer some questions and solve a few problems here and there. And give that a little bit of a practice. If you do...
Well, let's see the tip.
Oh yeah, the tip. That tip has dropped way down. We were at a fat 1/8 of an inch now, or before, and we're now sub 1/8 of an inch. Then end on. Oops. I don't know if it'll focus on that.
It won't focus on that very well.
But the tip is a nice round. If you really hate yourself, get yourself a series of washers and drop the washers on there, and that will really tell you. See if I've got one of the appropriate size. It'll really tell you how rounded out you've got it. See that? It's pretty good. All right, and if you had a few different ones, you could check different areas on the bar. Okay. All right, give it a whirl. Consider that as sensible of an exercise as making the 1-inch square points. If you make a 1-inch square point and then round it out, and you do that once or twice every time you light up the forge before you do anything else, and then you do your cutoff, it is going to make you so much of a better smith. All right? Good luck.